Hi everyone, this is Jill Sparrow again talking to you about marriage, and today we want to focus on everybody's favorite topic, conflict.
No.
No, not really. But it's so important to talk about conflict because as long as we're breathing, we are going to have conflict with our spouse. And it's important to know that it's not whether we have conflict or not that determines whether we have a good marriage or a bad marriage, but it's really how we deal with the conflict.
Yeah, when we first got married, Jill taught me something about marriage and about relationship. She came to me one morning, she said to me, "What's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine." And from there on in, we didn't have any conflicts. No, no, seriously. One of the things that helps me with conflict is that I always try and keep in mind what's important to Jill is important to me. And if I make that important, then we have less conflict because I'm able to put myself into her shoes and to understand what's important to her. And then because it's important to her, it becomes important to me.
True. And, before I got married, I thought I had it all together. I thought I had no issues or I had dealt with all my issues. And then I got married and it was like, wow.
And I pointed them all out.
Yeah, exactly. But what I learned was that God wanted to use our marriage to really help me to grow and become more of the person that God wanted me to be. And conflict actually does that. I'll blow myself up. One of the areas that we'll have conflict with, and we've gotten better over time, but I'm not as organized as Rob is, and a lot of times I could be scattered, and sometimes that will affect Rob. Maybe I'm not doing the things that he asks me to do, or making them as much of a priority because I'm kind of all over the place. And when he first approached me about that, I kind of was like, well, I'm trying, I'm doing the best I can, and I didn't really put effort into it, but that caused a lot of conflict in our marriage because I wasn't taking to heart what he was saying. And as I began to grow and learning how to deal with conflict and putting what was important to him and making it important to me, we began to have that issue resolved.
It was very true. And I also learned from Jill because if it was up to me, everything would be organized, everything would be planned. We would be planned weeks in advance, sometimes months in advance, everything. But I've learned to be spontaneous because Jill's very spontaneous and she's very fun-loving. And I've learned to have fun because Jill's showed me and she's helped me to not be so organized and not to have everything so organized. So God brings opposites together. And he brings them together because the Bible says that the two are supposed to become one flesh, that we learn from one another. So conflict isn't a bad thing if you handle it correctly because you're learning how to have the two extremes or the two opposites kind of meet in the middle.
And, I have met a lot of couples that would rather not deal with conflict. They're like, you know what, well, we'll just deal with that later. Or, you know what, fine, you could have what you want. But that's very unhealthy, too. I always wonder when people say, well, we never fight. It kind of
They're probably not married.
It raises red flags in my mind because I get concerned about that because when you have conflict, you're working things out with one another, and when you stuff things down and you don't resolve that conflict, it leaves a lot of resentment, and it really could be make room for a breakdown in communication and eventually hurt your marriage tremendously.
Yeah, and I think of it like this, is that if you stuff enough things down, if you're stuffing enough feelings down or you're avoiding the issues long enough, it kind of builds up the pressure. And eventually that pressure has to be released. And then it ends up, a lot of times, those people who try to avoid conflict actually end up with the worst kinds of conflict. So I don't think conflict is necessarily the problem, it's how you handle it.